Imagine working for 40 years, paying into a system your entire life, and then losing tens of thousands of dollars simply because of one decision you made on one ordinary afternoon. A decision that felt small at the time, but that you can never take back once it's done. And the wild part is that most retirees make this exact mistake without ever realizing it happened, until years later when the damage is already locked in for the rest of their life. So if you're getting close to retirement, or you're helping a parent or grandparent think through this exact decision right now, stay with me for the next few minutes, because this one decision affects almost everyone who will ever collect Social Security, whether they're a teacher, a truck driver, a small business owner, or someone who spent 40 years in a corporate office. And understanding it properly could mean the difference between a comfortable retirement and constantly feeling like you're falling behind. No matter how much you manage to save along the way, here's the thing nobody really explains clearly. Social Security isn't just a monthly check that shows up when you turn a certain age. It's actually one of the biggest financial decisions most Americans will ever make, right up there with buying a home or choosing how to invest a retirement account. And yet most people spend more time researching which streaming service to subscribe to than they do researching how Social Security actually works. That's not a knock on anyone, it's just how the system is set up. The rules are confusing, the terminology sounds like a foreign language, and the Social Security Administration doesn't exactly sit you down and walk you through the consequences of each choice. So today we're going to break down the single most common and most costly mistake retirees make, why it happens so often, and what the alternative looks like, using plain English and realistic examples instead of confusing jargon. Let's start with a basic fact that surprises a lot of people the first time they hear it. You can start collecting Social Security as early as age 62. For a lot of people, that sounds like great news, because who wouldn't want to start getting paid a few years earlier? But here's the catch that trips up millions of retirees every single year. If you claim at 62 instead of waiting, your monthly benefit gets permanently reduced. And I mean permanently, not temporarily, not until some later adjustment kicks in, permanently for the rest of your life. Depending on your birth year, claiming at 62 instead of your full retirement age can reduce your monthly benefit by around 30%. Think about that for a second. 30% less, every single month, for potentially 20 or 30 years of retirement. On a benefit that might have been $2,000 a month, that's a difference of $600 every month, month after month, year after year, for as long as you live. Now here's a question worth sitting with. If someone offered you a choice between a smaller paycheck starting today or a noticeably larger paycheck starting a few years from now, which would you choose? Most people would want more information before answering, and that's exactly the point, because this is precisely the choice Social Security is asking every American to make, whether they realize it or not. So let's talk about what full retirement age actually means, because this term gets thrown around constantly, but rarely gets explained well. Full retirement age, often abbreviated as FRA, is the age at which you're entitled to your complete, unreduced Social Security benefit based on your work history. For most people retiring today, that age is 67, though it can vary slightly depending on the year you were born, so it's always worth checking your specific full retirement age using the Social Security Administration's official tools rather than assuming. Claim before that age, and your benefit shrinks. Wait past that age, and something interesting happens, your benefit actually grows. This is where most of the confusion and most of the missed opportunity tends to happen. Delaying your claim beyond full retirement age triggers what's called delayed retirement credits, and according to publicly available information from the Social Security Administration, these credits can increase your benefit by roughly 8% for every year you wait, up until age 70. After age 70, there's no additional benefit to waiting longer, so 70 is generally considered the maximum useful claiming age. Let's put real numbers on this so it actually clicks. Say your full retirement age benefit would be $2,000 a month at age 67. If you claim at 62, that same benefit might shrink to somewhere around $1,400 a month, permanently. But if you wait until 70, that same starting benefit could grow to somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,400 to $2,500 a month, again, permanently, for the rest of your life. That's not a small difference. That's potentially $1,000 a month or more, depending on your specific numbers, just based on when you decided to press the button. Now, I want to pause here and be very clear about something important, because this is where a lot of financial content online gets it wrong or oversimplifies things in a way that isn't actually helpful. Waiting until 70 is not automatically the right choice for everyone. This is not a video telling you there's one correct answer that applies to every single person watching. Your health, your family history, your other sources of income, your spouse's benefits, and your immediate financial needs all matter enormously, and ignoring those factors to chase a bigger number later can be just as much of a mistake as claiming too early without thinking it through. So let's talk about why so many people claim early in the first place, because understanding the reasoning helps explain why this mistake is so common. According to financial professionals who work with retirees regularly, a lot of early claiming comes down to fear rather than math. People worry that Social Security might run out entirely, or that the rules might change before they get their share, so they rush to claim as early as possible just to make sure they get something. Here's a pattern interrupt worth thinking about. Even in the most conservative projections discussed publicly, Social Security is expected to continue paying benefits, though the exact funding structure may look different in the future, and decisions about future funding are ultimately up to lawmakers, not something any individual retiree needs to personally outrun by claiming early. In other words, rushing to claim out of panic is often based on a misunderstanding rather than an accurate read of the actual situation. Another major reason people claim early is more practical than emotional. Some retirees genuinely need the income right away. Maybe they lost a job in their early 60s and don't have another source of income to bridge the gap. Maybe they don't have significant retirement savings and Social Security is their main source of support. In situations like that, claiming early isn't a mistake at all. It's simply reality, and there's no shame in that. The real mistake isn't claiming early when you truly need to. The real mistake is claiming early without understanding what you're giving up, or claiming early when you actually had other options available and just didn't realize it. This is the distinction that gets lost in most conversations about Social Security, and it's the whole reason this topic deserves more attention than it usually gets. Let's introduce another layer to this conversation, because there's a second mistake that often travels alongside claiming too early, and it has to do with working while collecting benefits before reaching full retirement age. Here's something that catches a lot of people off guard. If you claim Social Security before your full retirement age and you're still working, there's an earnings limit that can temporarily reduce your benefits if you earn above a certain threshold. According to publicly available information for 2026, that earnings limit is $23,400 for the year. If you earn more than that from a job while collecting early benefits, Social Security may withhold $1 in benefits for every $2 you earn above that limit. Now, here's the part that surprises people even more. This isn't necessarily money that's lost forever. Once you reach full retirement age, Social Security recalculates your benefit to account for the months where money was withheld, so it's more of a temporary adjustment than a permanent penalty. But in the moment, it can feel like a serious blow, especially for someone who claimed early specifically because they thought they needed extra income while continuing to work part-time. This is exactly the kind of detail that most people don't learn about until it happens to them, which is why understanding it ahead of time can prevent a stressful surprise later. It's worth adding that this earnings limit applies specifically to income earned from a job, meaning wages or self-employment income, and according to publicly available information, it generally does not apply to other types of income such as pensions, rental income, interest, dividends, or withdrawals from retirement accounts. That distinction matters, because someone who claims early and lives mostly off savings or investment income while working only a little, or not at all, may never run into this earnings limit issue in the first place, while someone who claims early but keeps working a full-time job could see a meaningful portion of their benefit temporarily withheld without fully realizing why it happened, until they see the reduced deposit hit their bank account. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something almost nobody considers when they're first thinking about claiming Social Security, and that's the idea of a break-even age. This concept helps explain why the decision isn't as simple as bigger number equals better choice. The break-even age is essentially the point in your life where the total amount of money you've received from claiming later catches up to and eventually surpasses the total amount you would have received from claiming earlier. According to publicly available analysis, this break-even point often falls somewhere in the late 70s to early 80s, depending on your specific benefit amounts. What that means in plain English is this: if you claim early, you get smaller checks, but you get more of them sooner. If you claim later, you get bigger checks, but fewer of them overall, unless you live long enough to make waiting the better financial move. It's a bit like choosing between a smaller harvest that arrives right away or a larger harvest that takes a few extra seasons to come in. Both are reasonable depending on how much time you realistically expect to spend enjoying it. So here's the uncomfortable question this raises, and it's one that financial planners deal with constantly. How long do you expect to live? Nobody can answer that with certainty, and that's exactly why this decision is genuinely difficult, not because the math is complicated, but because the math depends on something nobody can know in advance. This is where family health history, current health conditions, and honest self-reflection become part of a financial decision in a way that catches a lot of people off guard the first time they think it through seriously. Now, here's a pattern interrupt worth sitting with. Many people underestimate how long they'll actually live. According to publicly available longevity data, a healthy person reaching age 65 today may live well into their 80s or even 90s, which is longer than a lot of people instinctively assume when they're planning their retirement income. If you assume you'll only live into your mid-70s and claim early based on that assumption, but you actually live into your late 80s or beyond, you could end up with 2 or 3 decades of reduced, monthly, income that you can never adjust or fix, simply because of an assumption made decades earlier that turned out to be wrong. This is precisely why claiming early without running the numbers carefully is considered such a costly and common mistake, not because early claiming is always wrong, but because so many people make the decision without actually thinking through the long-term math at all. Let's talk about another piece of this puzzle that often gets completely overlooked, and that's spousal and survivor benefits. If you're married, your claiming decision doesn't just affect you, it can significantly affect your spouse as well, both while you're alive and after you're gone. Here's a scenario that financial professionals bring up often. Imagine a couple where one spouse earned significantly more over their career than the other. If the higher-earning spouse claims early, they lock in a permanently reduced benefit, and that reduced amount can also affect the survivor benefit the lower-earning spouse might eventually receive after the higher earner passes away. In many cases, financial professionals suggest that it can make sense for the higher-earning spouse to delay claiming as long as possible, even up to age 70, while the lower-earning spouse claims earlier if needed for immediate income, since this can maximize the survivor benefit down the road. This is a nuanced strategy, though, and it depends heavily on each couple's specific ages, incomes, and health situations. So it's the kind of decision that benefits enormously from careful planning rather than a one-size-fits-all rule. It also helps to remember that spousal benefits work a bit differently from individual benefits. Since a spouse may be eligible to receive a benefit based on their partner's work record instead of their own, if that amount would actually be higher, which is another detail that surprises people who assume their benefit is only ever calculated from their own personal earnings history. There's also a specific and somewhat heartbreaking scenario that comes up more often than people expect. Sometimes the spouse with the higher benefit is dealing with a serious illness, while the healthier spouse has a lower benefit. In situations like this, financial professionals often point out that it may make more sense for the healthier spouse to begin claiming their own smaller benefit right away, while allowing the higher earner's benefit to continue growing through delayed retirement credits, since that larger benefit could eventually convert into a larger survivor benefit for whichever spouse lives longer. These are exactly the kinds of situations where personalized guidance from a financial professional or a Social Security specialist becomes genuinely valuable, because general rules of thumb don't always apply cleanly to real family situations. Let's zoom out for a second and talk about why this single decision, the age at which you claim Social Security, ends up being so much more impactful than most people expect. Social Security isn't just a nice bonus on top of your retirement savings for most Americans. According to publicly available research, it represents a significant portion of income for a large percentage of retirees, and for some people it's close to their entire retirement income. When a benefit that large gets permanently reduced by 20 or 30% because of a decision made at 62, that's not a small rounding error. That compounds over an entire retirement and can mean the difference between comfortably covering expenses and constantly feeling squeezed every single month. On the flip side, delaying claiming without any real plan can also backfire if it means draining other savings too quickly or working longer than you genuinely like to avoid claiming early. So this really is a balancing act rather than a simple race toward the biggest possible number. Here's another angle worth considering, and it ties directly back to inflation, something everyone watching this has felt firsthand over the past several years. Social Security benefits typically receive an annual cost of living adjustment, often referred to as a COLA, which is designed to help your benefit keep pace with rising prices over time. Here's the part that matters for this conversation. Because that adjustment is a percentage of your existing benefit, a larger starting benefit from delaying your claim doesn't just stay larger. It tends to grow by a larger dollar amount each year as cost of living adjustments get applied, since a percentage increase on a bigger number produces a bigger dollar increase. Over a retirement that could last 2 or 3 decades, that gap can become quite significant, which is one more reason financial professionals often emphasize thinking long-term rather than focusing only on the first few years of retirement. Now, let's bring this back to something practical, because understanding all of this is only useful if it actually changes how you approach your own decision or helps you have a more informed conversation with a financial professional. The first step, according to widely available guidance, is simply knowing your own full retirement age, since this varies slightly depending on your birth year and serves as the baseline for every other calculation. From there, it's worth getting an actual estimate of what your benefit would look like at 62, at your full retirement age, and at 70, since seeing the real numbers side by side tends to make the decision far more concrete than thinking about it in the abstract. The Social Security Administration provides tools for exactly this purpose, and using your own actual numbers, rather than assuming a generic example applies to you, is one of the most valuable steps anyone approaching retirement can take. It's a bit like checking your car's actual fuel gauge instead of guessing how much gas is left based on how far you drove last time. The estimate might be close, but the real number is what actually matters when you're planning a long trip. From there, it becomes about weighing your own health, your family's longevity history, your spouse's situation if you're married, your other income sources, and your honest financial needs, ideally with guidance from a qualified financial professional who can look at your complete picture rather than just one piece of it. Let's talk about one more myth that trips people up, because it comes up constantly in conversations about this topic. Some people assume that if they don't claim Social Security immediately at 62, they're somehow leaving money on the table or missing out entirely. But that's not how it works. The money isn't lost, it's essentially being redirected into a larger monthly benefit later, assuming you live long enough to benefit from that trade-off. Understanding this reframes the entire decision from a race to grab money as fast as possible into a genuine trade-off between smaller checks sooner or larger checks later, which is a much more accurate and much less stressful way to think about it. Here's a final pattern interrupt worth considering before we wrap up. This decision, unlike a lot of other financial choices, is largely irreversible. Once you claim and start receiving your monthly benefit, you generally can't go back and undo that choice to claim later instead, aside from some very limited and specific circumstances that exist under current rules, which makes this one of the few major financial decisions in life where getting it right the first time really does matter in a way that few other choices do. That's exactly why it deserves more attention, more research, and more thoughtful planning than most people give it, rather than defaulting to whatever age feels convenient in the moment or whatever a friend or family member happened to do. So here's what we've covered today, brought together in one place. Claiming Social Security early, at 62, permanently reduces your monthly benefit, potentially by around 30% depending on your birth year, and that reduction lasts for the rest of your life. Waiting until your full retirement age unlocks your complete, unreduced benefit, and waiting even further, up until age 70, can increase your benefit by roughly 8% for every additional year through delayed retirement credits. There's no additional benefit to waiting past 70, so that represents the practical ceiling for this particular decision. Working while collecting benefits before full retirement age can trigger a temporary earnings limit reduction, currently set at $23,400 for 2026, according to publicly available information. Though this typically gets recalculated in your favor once you reach full retirement age. The break-even age, often falling somewhere in the late 70s to early 80s, is the point where waiting to claim actually pays off financially, which means your own health and family longevity history are genuinely relevant factors in this decision, not just abstract math. Spousal and survivor benefits add another layer of complexity for married couples, and situations involving significant differences in benefit amounts or health between spouses often benefit from personalized professional guidance rather than a generic rule. And finally, this decision is largely permanent once made, which is exactly why taking the time to understand it now, before you're standing at that decision point, can make such a meaningful difference in how comfortable your retirement actually feels. None of this is meant to tell you exactly what to do, because your situation, your health, your family, and your finances are unique to you, and this video is meant purely for educational purposes rather than personalized financial or legal advice. If there's one habit worth adopting after watching this, it's simply pulling your own Social Security statement and actually looking at the real numbers tied to your own earnings record, rather than relying on averages, rules of thumb, or what a friend or coworker happened to do, since your own numbers are the only ones that truly apply to your own retirement. But hopefully, you now have a much clearer picture of why this particular decision carries so much weight, and why so many retirees end up looking back with regret over a choice they didn't fully understand at the time they made it. If you found this helpful, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who are trying to plan their retirement the smart way instead of guessing. If you haven't already, consider subscribing, because we break down topics exactly like this one every single week, cutting through the confusing jargon so you can make informed decisions with real confidence. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Are you planning to claim early, wait until full retirement age, or hold out until 70, and what's driving that decision for you? Drop a comment and let's talk about it, because these conversations genuinely help other people watching who might be wrestling with the exact same decision. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.